Well, hello, DevCentral community. It is DevCentral Connects time again. I'm John. This is Jason, and we are streaming live to YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all the places. So Jason, how's it going today, my friend?
It is going quite well. We had our final day of RSA.
That's right. Yeah,
excited to be here.
The trifecta. This is the third in a row. I feel like we're in a baseball like series or something. You know.
That's right.
This is for the sweep. For the sweep today. Awesome.
That's right.
Good to go. Well, hey, so quick question. This doesn't really have anything to do with security. We'll get into a lot of really cool stuff today, talking about the CIA triad and maybe some of the new technologies or new approaches to look at security models and all that. But unrelated to that, I was reading earlier today about a lot of people's desire to get out and travel, and the summer is coming up and all that stuff, right? Yeah. So anyway, I was like, well, what is the most visited destination, at least here in the United States? And it said that New York City was number one. And I'm sure that's based on historical numbers and maybe current, I don't know. But then it had like Los Angeles and Orlando and Las Vegas and Chicago. Those were some of the big ones. So, anyway, those are kind of cool. But I was wondering, are there any like destinations that you look forward to, you know, in terms of traveling and kind of getting back out as we open all this stuff back up?
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, we never really stopped traveling, even during COVID. So, you know, we still did some things. I mean, we didn't like go like vacation traveling, but you know, my grandkids are over in Kansas City, so we make trips over to Kansas City. My daughter too, and her husband. But you know, it's all about the grandbabies, and so we made trips over there, and we went camping last weekend down at Branson, Missouri, which is like the Vegas of the Midwest, they say. So,
right.
But we are doing some traveling. But this summer, actually, we're not doing a whole lot this summer. We're saving it for the fall. We're planning to go to California, to Disneyland, and then to the Bay Area to see some family, and then we're going to take a trip to Israel after Christmas. So,
that'll be fantastic.
Assuming the bombing has stopped.
Right, exactly. Hopefully things have settled down and, you know, all that. But yeah, man, that's some great locations. Awesome, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
How about you?
A lot of fun. Yeah, for us, we don't have any crazy stuff. We've got like summer camps for the kids coming up and things like that. A couple of them down in Texas, and I'm trying to remember the different ones, but probably just more kind of, you know, nothing too exotic. We're not going to New York City or LA or anything, you know, just yet. So kind of more local kind of stuff. So anyway,
we're doing LA, we're doing Disneyland in
that's
Thanksgiving
right.
time frame. So I'm hitting one of those destinations. That's right. And I'm glad my teenagers are old enough now to where, you know, we're just putting them on a plane and sending them. They're doing a 2-week camp down in South Carolina, and rather than us driving them down there and figuring out something to do for 2 weeks before we bring them back, we just put them on a plane, and so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's nice to have them at that age. Just toss them on an airplane, say we'll see you when we get there. Good to go, man.
Kick them out of the car at the curbs, like they're your problem now, American Airlines. So
that's right. Good luck. You know, enjoy the peanuts and the free soda or whatever. Awesome.
That's right.
Well, hey, Alex just had a little comment there. Yeah, man, try Cape Town. That sounds like a great place, man. I've never been to Cape Town.
I just watched Dude Perfect just had their bucket list video come out Monday. Yeah. And I think they spent a little bit of time down in Cape Town for that, like doing the paragliding off of one of the cliffs up there, and going scuba diving in the kelp forest and all that. So that was kind of cool.
That's awesome.
I haven't been to Cape Town. I have been to Johannesburg, but I haven't been to Cape Town yet.
Yeah. That's a couple of miles, you know, away from us here in the United States, but that's okay. It's it's a great place.
It's like one of the 2 longest flights I've ever been on was like Atlanta to Joburg was like 15 and a half hours. And the other really long one was the same 15 and a half hours as LA to Sydney. So not a big fan of those almost a whole day flights.
Man. And, you know, I used to think on those flights, like when I was younger, I used to think, well, if you're going to go like trans, you know, oceanic kind of a flight, then they're going to have the nice big seats, plenty of leg room for everybody. No.
Yeah.
This is not the truth. You're still in a little seat and you just sit there for 15 hours. Yeah. That's crazy. So.
That's true, except my flight to Sydney, I was in premium economy, and it was actually nicer than any first class I've ever been on here in the States. They had the nice little roll bar for your feet, so you could kick your shoes off and kind of massage your feet. And they brought you alternating hot towels and cold towels like every hour and a half, so you could freshen up throughout the flight. And they had a little snack bar at the front of the premium economy section, and very nice reclining, not recliners, but reclining seats that went past like 3 inches. And so you could actually kind of get lay back. And so, and that was Virgin Australia, very high quality premium economy.
Way to go, Virgin Australia. Yeah, that's awesome.
This is not a paid endorsement.
Right. But just, for those that are interested, for those that might benefit from that, you never know. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
That's right.
All right. Yeah. Well, good to go, man. Well, hey, I know we got a great show today, right? We got an awesome guest who is ready to just, inform all of us about security methodologies and approaches and all that. It's going to be fantastic.
That's right. Yeah. So he's an Atari enthusiast at the age of 4, hacktivist at 13, author. And when he's not wearing his gi, throwing people around the jiu-jitsu mats, he wears a variety of cartoon and anime favorites. Please welcome Mario Platt. Mario, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you, man. Great to have you. So Mario, you're a jiu-jitsu master, right? So
I'm not master. I'm not very good at it. I'm good at being injured all the time. Not very good at everything else. But you can't have everything, right?
That's right. You can have.
I don't know much about jiu-jitsu. I have several friends who are very, very good at it. But it scares me just watching it. So, kudos to you for wanting to get down there and throw people around.
Nothing for you living in the moment and someone else trying to choke you. Yeah, it's my it's my meditation. It's my meditation.
Yeah. My sport of choice is the recliner in front of the TV. So
right. Hey, we've all got our sports, right?
That's fantastic. That's right. I yesterday somebody had shared something on Twitter, and it was like a professional tag, and I didn't even know there were pro leagues for tag, but it's pretty much parkour, competitive parkour, right? Because one of you is trying to tag the other, but it's all these obstacles and you're flying around, and it's crazy. But just watching it, I felt like I broke several things, and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening.
Nice.
Well, the reason we have you here today is, I read one of your articles on your website, which is Security Differently. And I'm going to drop that in the comments for everyone so you can go check this article out. And, you kind of talked about moving past a world of the CIA triad. So let's start with that. What is the CIA triad?
So the CIA triad has been along. I don't even know when it started, but certainly from the 90s onward, has caught up as an industry, and it's part of every training course that you do on security. It's kind of the basics of how we explain what security is. So CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and what we as an industry perceive that to mean what it is that we do. Right. So our jobs as security professionals is to ensure that that data is kept confidential, that we've got integrity in all of the transactions or whatever operations we have going on, and making sure that the system is available. So in the past, I would say 10, 15 years, I think the role of security and availability has slightly changed as practices evolve, etc. Personally, I'm of the opinion that most security professionals should be very far away from availability, because operations people know much better than we do on how to ensure systems are available. But it's still a big part of, at least on the part of managing risk, in managing compliance, it's still a big part of our roles as well, making sure that we have measures in place to ensure the availability of our operations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah,
So
I see availability as one of those things to where it's kind of like a all hands on deck. Because one thing to design an available system as a network guy, and I can say, hey, I can make sure my connectivity has redundancy. I can make sure my systems have redundancy, but I might not be thinking about the 300 gigabyte DDoS attack that's coming at me. And so how do I plan for that if my 1 gig feeds to each of my redundant links is completely full? And so
that's my background as well. So I have
into that availability conversation, right?
Yep, that's my background as well. I was a network security engineer for a long time. I've got over 12 years of telco experience, so I come exactly from that world.
Okay, yeah,
nice.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we know the CIA triad, and we know how it got its start, and everybody knows that comes up through security training. Why is that no longer sufficient?
So I think there are a few reasons why that is the case. I think the problem is not so much what it is, but what it came to be. Right. So, in order to frame this better, I'm actually going to quote a U.S. professor, Professor Barry Horowitz from the University of Virginia. Right. So he, in my opinion, he gave the best quote that explains the problems that we have with CIA right now. Right. So the quote is, when you ask an engineer to make your boat go faster, you get the trade space. You can get a bigger engine, but give us some space in the bank next to the engine. You can change the hull shape, but it will affect your draw. You can give up some weight, but that will affect your stability. When you ask an engineer to make your system more secure, they pull out a pad and a pencil and start making lists of bolt-on technology. Then they tell you how much it's going to cost. Right. I think this quote really embodies the problem of what CIA came to be. Right. That because security used to be developed as a discipline, so detached from the operations of the systems, right? So we were kind of the gatekeepers, making sure that people were doing all of the things we needed to do to make compliance or whatever the requirements we have. It came to mean you need this other thing to make your system exhibit those properties, those qualities. Right? And that's part of the reason why I think we now have still the approach that is kind of validated with all of the security vendors that we've got on the planet, which are in the space of millions. It's all these other things that if you want to make our system secure, look, it's this vendor for the encryption, it's that vendor for this and for that, and we get a mishmash of security tools, right? That typically get even managed by different teams that aren't directly involved with operations, right? That have all of this responsibility of keeping the system secure, but don't necessarily understand how the operation actually works. Right? Yeah. So, for instance, with us from a networking background, we saw all of that in the 90s, right? There's no one that did network operations or network security operations that didn't get, as soon as something was wrong, they were going to ask us, what is the firewall doing? Right. It's that type of mentality, right? That exacerbated over years and years of industry of getting bolt-on technology on top of what people were operating, that I think led to, it may not have been the intended design of CIA being what it came to be, but there was the consequence of how things evolved, right? With CIA, people that only focus really on CIA tend to be detached from the operation, what in safety is called the difference between the sharp end, so people actually doing the doing, and the blunt end, right? So people more detached from what operations is. And I think it's that tension that people that don't necessarily understand what an operating system is, how a network works, all of those, making security decisions in not understanding this trade space, right? And not understanding that when we try to optimize for a particular type of outcome, we are making trades somewhere. And not in, especially when those are managed across silos and across different responsibilities between security engineering and operations, etc. You get these pockets of knowledge and everyone gets an incomplete mental model of what your operation actually looks like. And I think that's part of the challenge why CIA, it's not that it's wrong, right? It's just it came to mean and people came to perceive that as something that is not directly integrated into the work that they do.
Yeah, that makes sense. To bring it kind of to a sports analogy, a sports analogy. It's like, you have the coach that's been a winning coach for 20 years, but maybe they have a couple bad seasons and people start to tune him out. And it's like, it's not that the coach doesn't coach well. It's just that, nobody's paying attention to what he's saying anymore. And so it's that loss of confidence.
But that is also part of what we see, right? And actually, it's something that I called out in a few of my articles before. The worst thing than not having a threat model is having an outdated one. And a lot of the way we currently still do security is based on outdated threat models. Right? Mm-hmm. So, for instance, in my role as head of InfoSec, for instance, I get client questionnaires all the time. Right? There is one question that I know always gets in 100% of all security questionnaires. Where is your DR site? And the answer is, I don't have a DR site, I have a distributed architecture. Right? It's that different type of, I think that's another good analogy on trying to kind of portray the differences, right? The world has changed, the threat model has changed, how we build systems, how we operate them has changed. But the way we're talking about security, the questions we are asking of our suppliers haven't necessarily adapted to the new threat model, to the new way of doing things.
Yeah. Well, and do you think that is do you think part of that is a component of age? Like a lot of our trusted security practitioners are, they've been in the industry for a really long time, not age from you're an old person, but age in that you've been here a long time and people just get stuck in a mode of doing things. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's something else?
So I think that plays a role. But I like to use kind of a different model to kind of think about that problem space. So Jay Bloom from Red Hat. So he has one of my favorite talks of all time called The Sociotechnicity of DevOps that I would recommend everyone to see. In it, he talks about something he calls the time span of discretion, right? Which in a nutshell means how long will your manager allow you to act before he comes in check on your work. Right. And I think that is the big problem. When we had organizations that all of them worked in ITIL, right, where we had all of these gates across the process that people from operations, etc., they all had their say or their place in the process to say, I'm not happy with this, let's stop, let's rethink, etc. There wasn't really a problem, right, because everything worked that way, right? We all knew what was happening. The problem is that risk and compliance people in particular, we still have this time span of discretion of multi-years, right? Our compliance, if you're an ISO house, your certificate is valid for 3 years. You do the annual stuff, but we're talking multi-year cycles. We're talking uncertainty. We're talking risk. Something may or may not happen, right? And that is a time span of discretion that is multi-year cycles. Suddenly, the things that we are talking about need to be integrated into 2-week sprints, because that's how operations is, how people developing systems actually work. So we've got this tension between people that are thinking of, I need to write the spec because in the next 2 weeks I need to get this done or have a step forward, while you have people that have a role to play in the process that only have this multi-year view of what their role is. And I think it's this type of tension of security teams from a compliance and risk, not appreciating the differences of what uncertainty means in these two different use cases, and how their feedback, what they want to see, needs to be integrated into the delivery of what's going to come to life in 2 weeks' time. That is a big part of this tension that we see.
In that tension, in your opinion, do you think that like delivery and deployment needs to slow down a little bit, or do you think that risk and compliance needs to speed up?
The latter, for sure. Okay. Well, not necessarily, right? The thing is, all of our work produces artifacts, right? Whether you're a compliance person or you're a developer or a platform engineer, whatever, your work produces artifacts. I think the problem we have here is how those artifacts are translated into what people actually need to do. Right? So to give you a very specific example, I see still most security teams, and I was a consultant for about 3 years, so I saw this across many different industries as well. The problem is that most governance functions, they think that they write a Word document with some policies that may or not make operational sense because they're based on outdated threat models, etc. And they expect that to be something that is adhered to on all of these 2-week cycles. Right? That's not going to work because it requires translation. So, for instance, companies that are starting to do this type of thing really well, they don't have their policies as some Word document stared in a SharePoint folder that no one knows about. Right? They codify their requirements as code. Right. Just as you do developers get stats on performance whenever they make a commit, they get is it meeting is the functionality X or Y or Z actually working? They get all of that feedback immediately when on push, on commit, whatever strategy people decide to do. But whatever that is, before the end of your sprints finish, you get the feedback is this meeting the requirements that I've integrated into my quality process that validates that I'm doing the right things. Right? And until all of these security teams either find a way of getting someone else to develop these artifacts that they can be directly integrated into their process, or they themselves start, instead of just creating pretty words on documents, writing the compliance as code DSLs so that it can be integrated, we're going to have this problem, right? Because every time that something is not meeting a particular compliance requirement, if you don't have this integration into the process, you're not going to learn about it now. You're going to learn about it 6 months from now, and then it's going to have to get into a restreatment plan, and then it's going to have to be followed on by internal audit, and then you're going to have to convince your auditor that you've got it in place and you're going to fix it at some point. So it's all of those things that then become kind of snowball effect down the line, right?
And then you're right back into the bolt-on model, right?
Exactly. So, and it's the problem also of related language, right? If I'm talking to an engineer and I'm talking about multi-year cycles of anything, they're usually not very interested. They want me to tell them what it is that they need to do for the next 2 weeks before they finish the next sprint, or at least provide them with capabilities that they can just consume it. Right? And I think a very good place to look at is how platform infrastructure teams evolved over the past 10 years. Right? So in the late 90s, we were all building our switches, our routers, or all of our things, and delivering for someone, okay, now you can connect your systems here because everything's plumbed correctly, right? But these days, it no longer works like that. What most platforms are being managed as products, right? So you build capabilities that you then have people having the least knowledge required to use the capabilities you've provided and integrated them into their work. Right? So if you've got a Terraform module that you're not going to have to be, as the senior platform engineer, create a specific Terraform piece of code for someone else to integrate. You give them a module, you tell them how the module works, and they just use the model. Right? It's an enabling type process. You provide them with the tools, with the capabilities that they can integrate into their work without necessarily having to be experts in your domain. Right?
Yeah,
I think that's where security can learn a lot from how platform teams have evolved over the past 10 years.
Yeah, that's an important part of, and trying to get everybody to see each other as partners rather than adversaries, and getting ops and engineering and development and security all on the same page to be able to help each other.
Yeah. Mario, I feel like there's some leadership qualities that need to come into play here as well, right? Certainly the technology, but how do you bridge that gap? That's an important part.
So again, it comes down to approach, right? So a big part of a big problem with the technology and how it evolved is that these days you really need to integrate your artifacts, the things you produce, directly into the process, right? Otherwise, it's just pretty words on paper that people don't have the time or the willingness to go and look, generally speaking. So how that translates into leadership is thinking about, in my opinion, two things. The first one is, what is the role of my team? So as the head of InfoSec or as the CISO, what is the role of my team? What am I here to do? And the second part is, how am I going to make that happen? The big considerations is so on the first one is again the problem with language, right? We've been saying that we want to enable organizations for the best part of 20 or 30 years, but the reality is on the ground, on the day-to-day, that's not really what we've been doing for the past 30 years, right? It just wasn't. We were managing risk registers, we were managing compliance requirements, we were trying to make it easy, kind of creating some guidelines on a Confluence page or on a SharePoint document so that people could consume, right? And hoping that everything would turn out for the best. Now we don't have the ability to do all of that, right? Because the people that are really good at doing these kinds of things at scale, I'm talking like the Netflixes, the Facebooks, the Twitters, and all of those. It's either integrated into the process, right? In those organizations have seen that actually speed and quality they go together, right? You're not trading off one for the other. You build all of these assurances into the process because you want to go fast. Right? The same way that we've got the testing for a particular product feature. Right? The only reason why we are, from a continuous deployment perspective, the only reason why organizations are happy to deploy code 20 or 30 times a day is because they have confidence that the quality they've embedded into the process is validating if something broke. Because if they didn't have the continuous validation that the features would continue to work upon change, no one in their right minds would allow an organization to deploy code 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 times a day.
Right.
And that is the difference. Right? Until we get to a point where security is also part of that group, right? Where our mitigations, and that's a big problem generally in security as well, is it's not enough to just put on a mitigation. If you don't build the continuous validation that your mitigation is being effective, we are not allowing organizations to move at speed. Right? Because anything could potentially change, that mitigation no longer effective, and no one would know until something went wrong. Right? So it's not just about adopting the mitigations, it's also adding the tests that validate that those mitigations are also are still effective. Right? And that's all the part on leadership. It's thinking about this is my organization, this is what we do. Everyone's a technology organization these days, right? That's just the reality of how the world evolved. And until we start thinking what the role is in terms of building capability, reducing the cognitive load required from other teams around us to actually do things securely, that's a part of leadership that also needs to change. But also, obviously, people need to see that their role has changed. If we think this is this DevOps is just a thing that will go away and something will come next, and I don't really need to worry about it because that's the tech stuff, then yeah, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution, right? And I think that's the part of leadership on understanding that even if I don't have the skills, I need to make sure that what gets to the technical teams is written, the artifacts are done in a way that can be easily consumed by them. Whether my current risk and compliance teams can do that by themselves, or I need maybe another function, a function of application security, of security engineers that bridge this gap between the risk and compliance world and what people are actually doing on the ground in these 2-week sprints, whatever fits your boots, right? Not particularly care. The key thing is these artifacts need to happen. These things need to be integrated into the process, because until they do, we're still gatekeeping, right? If we're not doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've talked about the CIA triad. We've talked about leadership's responsibility and all this. Tell us about Sonal Yu's D.I.E model. How did that come about?
So it's really interesting how Sonal came up with all of this. So he took it from the perspective of the evolution of attacks, right? And how we can start looking at security on how it was performed in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and the 10s, etc. And he started making some comparisons on how at the beginning in the 90s it was mostly about asset management, etc. So the first pillar of NIST, identify. Then in the 90s we started having more of a focus on on protection. Sorry. So that's when we started having more industry capabilities, such as malware, anti-malware. We started having firewalls. We started having all of those technologies to help us protect systems. Then in the early 2000s, it was the decade of SIEM, I would say. So everyone started doing these big SOCs and SIEM transformations and correlating rules and all of that. So it was also when we realized as an industry that we're going to get hacked. It's going to happen. So we really need to get good, not only at protecting, but also at detecting that something is wrong. And now in the 10s, it was mostly about the recovery, right? In focusing on response. Right? So we started having the SOARs and having all of those other types of technologies to make us better at actually responding to all of these incidents. And his view is we're seeing this go through the NIST, through the 5 NIST functions. Right? And so one of the patterns that we're starting to see is that the age of 20s, he calls it the age of recovery. Right? We're already starting to see some different types of attacks. So for instance, not just DDoS, but actually PDoS, so permanent denial of service, breaking firmwares, people going after Intel chips, right, to have these things at large. So we're seeing all of these new types of attacks starting to be used that are making us as an industry start thinking about this is all going to go wrong. How are we going to recover from this? Right? And this is kind of 3 steps or 4 steps ahead, more integrated than what we would think as disaster recovery or business continuity, right? This is more kind of existential within the process. This may need to happen, and we need to recover as quickly as possible. Right? And his view on how the attacks and the attackers are evolving their methods led them to this different way of thinking, right? So D.I.E. stands for distributed, immutable, and ephemeral, which have a relationship with the CIA, but it's not the same thing. It's done in a different way. The way I like to think about it, and this is something where I appreciate Sonil was the one creating all of this, but where I have a slight disagreement with how he exposed the problem. So he says that D.I.E. negates the need for CIA. Right? I don't think that's completely the case. I don't think it negates the need. It's a different level of abstraction. Right? So in CIA, we've got something that you really require a security professional. Right? What does confidentiality mean to a platform engineer? Right? Usually you have someone from a security team explaining, so these are the different ways that information could potentially be leaked. These are potentially some of the different ways we could try and manage that, or make sure that breaches of confidentiality aren't as likely. And we start thinking about that from that perspective. So bolting on the things that we already do. The big difference and the big advantage of the D.I.E. model is that it's none of that, right? It's about the being, right? It's not about availability. It's about having a distributed system. It's not about integrity or the installing of a file integrity monitoring product. It's about having immutable systems. Right? And it's not about kind of the general confidentiality of the systems that we know, the pets versus cattle comparison, that we're going to have to take care of this pet for multi-years, so we need to pay very good attention, care for it, etc. It's more if I've got a system, if I need to deliver a video like Netflix does, I'm going to spin up a system, I'm going to deliver the content usually within 7 to 10 minutes, and then I'm going to kill it because I don't need it anymore. When another client needs another video, I'll just spin another system, I'll deliver the video, and I'm going to kill it again. Right? And what I find interesting there's a lot of pushback on D.I.E., I think, generally speaking, from the CIA model, for 2 reasons. One is on inertia, right? Every time there's paradigm shifts, there's going to be inertia, right? People have been successful with those models, and until they run out of business, kind of like Blockbuster, or they don't get a job because they don't have the right skills, people don't feel the need to change, right? They've been doing this successfully for 20 years, so inertia always plays a role. But the other part is also that it's hard, right? D.I.E. is much harder for security people because they don't necessarily have an operations background. They don't necessarily understand application development. So in D.I.E., you can't bolt on. Yeah, you can bolt on your way to CIA. You cannot bolt on your way to D.I.E. Right? Your system is either immutable, or your definition of your systems, how you spin them up, is either immutable or it isn't. Right? And that's not a security control you add on top. It's something that it is or it's not, right?
It's right. And it's not even a security control at all, right? It's
exactly.
It's an organizational culture shift.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's not a security practice. It's an entire organization commitment.
Yep. The problem is even the kind of the truisms that are still valid, like economics, right? The basic, if you were to ask a security officer 10 years ago, a very simple question. Should you spend £300,000 to protect the system of value of £500,000? That's probably too much, right? We're already way over 50% of the value of the asset. It may not make much sense to do all of that, right? And any security leader will understand this. You don't spend more money protecting something than what it's worth. Yeah. The problem is that is still valid. We just need to think on a different scale. Right? If my system typically lives for 10 minutes, should I spend 20 minutes of my CI/CD pipeline securing it? Maybe not. Right? The same economic principles still apply. It's just they're done at a different scale because we're now thinking at different scales. Right? But I think that's also a big part of the challenge, right? On adopting. There's a lot of things that are still valid. There's a lot of things that we still need to keep on doing. It's just that the way of achieving them is different because all of everything that makes up an operational system, which security is a part of it, it's now pushed to the hands of people that have the agency over it, right? It's developers that need to be accountable for the security of their products. And we as security people, we are no longer the ones that are, let's say, or shouldn't be the ones accountable for making the system secure. We need to do, in my opinion, two things. The first one is build capabilities so that others don't need to have all of the expertise that we have to operate their system to make it secure. So we need to focus on building capability. And the other part is still the work of risk and compliance, which is important for organizations, particularly in the B2B space, where clients ask a lot of hard questions and you need to have answers to provide. And you need to think how you're going to connect that timeline, the capabilities that you're building, into giving you the assurances that you require to do a good job at managing risk, helping manage risk, and that helping meet compliance requirements.
Okay, yeah. So, so we have CIA, we have D.I.E. There's also Stride, and all these other models that we look at. How do we go forward from an industry that's stuck on CIA? How do we go forward into a model to where we see the value and still apply from CIA, but embrace industry-wide a model like D.I.E.?
So I think this is going to be maybe a bit controversial. The problem is we keep trying to find the solutions in our security vendors, and that's not where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, going back to D.I.E. D.I.E. is not something you bolt on. You either do it like that or you don't. And it's not your security vendor that's going to do that for you, right? There are cases and there are specific things where you need your security vendors, right? You don't do anti-malware without a security vendor. There's a lot of things you don't do. But these properties that kind of are the bulk of how secure your system is going to be, right? Ephemeral, immutable, distributed. Those aren't things that your security vendors are going to help you with. Right? Mm-hmm. That's something that your organization either develops systems to kind of those standards, to those patterns, or it doesn't. And as an industry, we're still looking at the unicorn security vendors. At what is the one thing I can buy from my own budget, and that's something that I talk a lot in Worldly Mapping as well. How the CISO budgets are also changing with regards to how we consume security. Again, it's all these things that are a bit let's say, invisible, but they have effects on the system. Right? So if you go talk to a CISO that is used to a 200 million security budget, and then you say, well, actually, we can now start consuming a lot of these capabilities directly from our cloud provider without having to have all of this capital or spent on licenses for this particular security product. And he's going to say, look, I've been having a 200 million. Now you're saying that my budget is going to be integrated into the billing of the CTO. I like my budget, right? It's all those things that end up playing a big role, right? In terms of how we approach all
that protects their fiefdom over the value
That's
and
just
integrity
human.
of the organization.
No, it's not. It's not so much integrity, right? It's a question of incentives. People see themselves again. In going back a bit to complexity science, this is all path dependent, right? In terms of the affordances. If your predecessor, when you as a CISO, if you go to a dinner with other CISOs, everyone's going to talk how big their budget is, and you don't want to be the guy with the least of it. It's just human. It's not a kind of a judgment of character that I'm making here, right? Far from it. It's just that all of these things, they end up playing a role, right? We are humans that live in complex systems. People evolve. Look, my manager previously used to have all of this big budget and go all of these things. Now I have the role. I expect to have those things, right? It's a matter of expectation and how the industries themselves evolve. In again, VC model of funding for security companies, I think also plays a big role on all of that, right? We've got all of these security vendors, everyone expecting to find the next 10x or 100x return security company. A lot of these companies, that's something that Sonil, you also talked about previously, they probably shouldn't be companies. They should probably be products or features in other products. But because of the VC model of funding, of having all of these security vendors popping up and see which we can monetize to get our returns as investors, also plays a role. Right? So there are all of these pressures, not only internally from, let's say, giving another example, if I was the head of information security coming to a new company, but I'm all about D.I.E., but my predecessor was all about CIA, I'm going to have all of that barrier in terms of communication to deal with, because people will not be expecting that this guy is coming in with a different way of doing things. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of proving myself, right? To explain, look, I don't do things like that. I'm here to do things differently. And on the day-to-day in each organization, all those things play a role, right? Our organizations are path dependent. It's not just one size fits all. We need to consider how people approach security. If the compliance guy is always sitting on the hammer, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, changing that approach and showing that things can be done differently takes effort, takes time, takes strategic investment, takes potentially laying some people off because they think their role isn't what the organization no longer needs to be, right? So all of those things play a role at small scale, and they aggregate at being systemic problems.
Yeah. Well, and just it's easier to spend money than it is to do the hard work, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned real quick. I wanted to bring up the article itself over here, because you mentioned the Wardley
mapping.
Wardley mapping. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Where'd my actual oh, here we go. Yeah. So I got to find my tab so I can slide it. Yeah. But can you tell me what a Wardley map is and how you use it for security?
Sure. So Wardley mapping is a model, right, that helps you make sense of the world and have conversations with other people about the evolution of things. Right? So at its most basic, a Wardley map has, let's say, an x-axis and a y-axis. Y typically refers to visibility, so things that are closer to the users, to a user need, which is usually the anchor, and then you have 4 stages, right? Which is Genesis, usually written as Genesis, custom built, product, and commodity. Right? And all of these things, so this is a model for how everything evolves. Right? So giving you, let's talk DevOps, for instance. Until we had computing as a commodity, right? N+1 was the way we had to provide robustness, a level of this recovery, right? Because that's all we had to do. If I needed more servers, we needed to get them in the data center, rack them, configure the network, install operating system. Then we can install applications, and then it's finally doing something useful. Right? It wasn't until we had this change in compute from a product, from something that I buy and put on a rack, to a commodity where I can just spin up and down, that DevOps emerged. Right? DevOps emerges from the move that computing made from product-based to a commodity. Right? That's what allowed all of these other things to emerge. And that's the basic idea in worldly mapping, is that everything usually evolves from being a genesis, like the IBM computers in the 50s. It goes through stages of being custom built for specific purposes. It eventually becomes productized and eventually becomes commoditized. And when something is commoditized, new order systems can be built on top of it. Right? Electricity is an example. Computing is an example. DevOps itself is already starting to become commoditized. So with the advent of serverless, new practices will emerge. New things will be done, right? And the big insight there are two big insights for me from worldly mapping. On one hand, it's about this understanding of evolution, that things go through stages, and things can be built on top, and that means also co-evolution of practices. Right? So ITIL was very good for product-based computing. It's not very good for commodity-based, because you just can spin up and down. So it's a constraint that if you add a waterfall constraint onto a pure cloud environment, you are hurting yourself, right? Because you now have practices that have evolved, that have emerged, that take full advantage of the capabilities that you now get with commoditized computing. Right? And the same thing will happen once we go to serverless. When people no longer need to worry about managing their own operational systems, certainly the development practices will co-evolve to keep up the pace with that. Right? So we're always evolving, and we're always building new things on top of that. But the main thing that worldly mapping, so as Kat Swattel, which is very well known in the Agile community and beyond, she usually says is that worldly maps and worldly mapping are different. Right? Because the worldly map is what you see in front of you. It's the artifact. And the artifact serves to have meaningful conversations with other people. Right? So diagram, something built in that I've created on a whiteboard, or is it a commodity, or is it a product that I can do with Threat Dragon or with Areas Risk, another threat modeling product? So there's a lot of things in that space. You can look at different ways of having a diagram or a visualization of a threat model across all of these stages. And it allows you to expose what are your chain of needs. So you need threat modeling needs to have a scope, needs to have a methodology. That's all a chain of needs up to the bottom, right? And it's that chain of needs that you can build a map on, and then you can have conversations with peers, with other people, saying, "Look at my map. Let's discuss the map. Is this the right positioning? Are these all the needs that I have?" And it allows for a space where you are not challenging the person, which may be the hippo problem, right? The highest paid person opinion in the room. You're not challenging the person that is giving you the narrative through a map. You're challenging the map. So it allows people to be less protective of the opinions that they voice, right? We're not talking about, is Mario right about X or Y? We've got an artifact in front of us. It's where we're collaborating, what we're jointly collaborating on. Is this the right thing? Am I capturing everything that needs to be captured? Right? And it allows for that distanciation from a narrative point of view. But the big benefit is really the language that goes with it. So you get access to things such as what Worldly calls a doctrine in the climatic patterns. There are things that you can use for conversation with management. I use the concepts behind worldly mapping a lot in terms of, I may not always show a map. I rarely show a map, to be honest. But I use the ideas of worldly mapping, the climatic patterns, etc., to talk about how the security industry is evolving, for instance. So an example, one of the climatic patterns in worldly mapping is creative destruction. Right? So creative destruction, think of it from a Ford pipeline perspective, right? They were building cars. Before Ford, cars were built a certain way. But after Ford, when he built the pipeline to start building all of the cars, the practices evolved. So if all you knew how to do was build cars without them being on a pipeline, suddenly you don't have a job. You're not required anymore. Your boss doesn't need you, right? Because he needs a different type of skill set to do that. Right? And that's a pattern that happens all of the time, right? Technology evolves, new practices emerge, and then suddenly it's not that everything you know is now irrelevant, is that you need to adapt what you were doing if you want to keep in business, if you want to keep being having a job. So I think, for instance, compliance is an area where this creative destruction pattern, I think, is happening. If all compliance people can do is kind of tick the box, I think that in 10 years' time, there may not be a role for you in industry. Right? Because if you're not codifying some of the things that you do, etc., obviously it's not just about the code, right? You need to know how to manage an auditor, and that's a skill in and of itself, right? Managing your auditors, it's one of my favorite sports, if I'm honest. But there are, the role itself changes, right? There are things that you were able to do a certain way that you now need to do a different way, and if you don't adapt, the creative destruction pattern will act on you.
Yeah. Well,
so it gives you all of these patterns that everyone understands, right? You don't need to be a security expert, a business expert, etc. It gives you a language that you can use with other people and to justify your positions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that stuff's fascinating. I learned just like I spent some time flipping around on your site after I found the first article, and I really appreciate the way you tear ideas apart. So I know we're up against the end of our time. In fact, we went way over the time that we asked of you. So I appreciate you hanging around for so long. Really appreciate.
Thank you very much for having me.
And absolutely. So thank you so much. And hopefully we can have you back again someday.
Yeah, whenever.
It's been a pleasure, Mario.
Appreciate it, Mario.
Thank you very much.
Awesome, man.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
That conversation, it makes me think that, there's some people you're around that kind of elevate you and thinking, man, I've been playing 2D chess in a 3D chess world. And so, I really think, that kind of thinking is needed in not just the security industry, but, the tech industry at large. So I think that was really good.
Yeah, I loved it, man. Really appreciate Mario. And
we got some comments too from Sarah. That was great. Yeah. Thank you, Mario and Leaf.
Mario rocks. Nice, that's right.
And Daniel. Proven process versus reality. Absolutely.
Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and Leaf, absolutely. That this is going to be one I'm going to have to watch back and take notes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we had a little talk pre-show, and he was talking about some other things that he's going to be talking to. The creator of the D.I.E model and Sonal Yu, and I was just like trying to scribble some notes. So I'd love to be a fly on the wall of that conversation when he has it next week. So.
Yep.
Go ahead, John. You were going to say something.
Yeah. It just occurs to me too, we're in the midst of RSA this week, and you go to a lot of these, sessions where they talk about new technologies and there's a lot of good thinking, and idea discussions, all that kind of stuff at conferences like RSA. There's also some more technical in the weeds, like hands-on lab stuff. But it occurs to me that it would, I think, be beneficial to have some sessions or just discussions like what we're doing now about how to think rightly about all these things. I think there's that side of it. So anyway, it's that's just
even
an
like
area.
His website to think differently about it first, right? Because we might have to think differently before we land on right.
That's right. That's right.
Because if we go straight to right, we may find out 6 months down the road, well, that wasn't right so much.
That's exactly right. So I think I just think it's fascinating. I think we all individually or collectively should take the time to build in some time to think about these things and not just be, fascinated by the next shiny object over there. Like, ooh, that's a cool, technology. Let me go learn that. It's like, well, okay, that's cool. Go learn it, but take a step back and say, let's think deeply about these things. And that's, man, I really appreciate Mario and his investment in that.
Yeah. And you can clearly see his passion about it too, right? It's not just, knowledge regurgitation, but he cares about it. It
right.
impacts him, at a deeper level than getting a paycheck. So
That's right.
that was good stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
We have about 5 minutes to review the rest of RSA, John. So
no problem.
What's on your list? I just really have a couple from yesterday to today that I wanted to jump on. But what did you find interesting in the last 24 hours of RSA?
Man, in the next 30 seconds, go. One of the things that I found fascinating was this was one of the, I think it was one of the, I can't remember if it was a keynote or a session. They've kind of blurred together a little bit. But it was a series of people that had talked about just their journey in cybersecurity and how they landed where they are today. And they held a variety of positions in the cybersecurity field. But it was interesting to me that they all had vastly different paths to land where they are today. And I guess it just reinforces the truth that, hey, there is no one, yellow brick road, this golden path that, you must start here in order to end here. And so it's encouraging in the sense that regardless of where you are, you can start, and, you don't have to let the fact that, hey, I've never really done this before, keep you back from jumping into the field and making a positive, difference. So it was just kind of cool to hear their stories on how they got to where they were. So anyway, that's a very broad thing.
On that point, I remember seeing a tweet, maybe it was about a week ago, from Dave Kennedy, of Trusted Security. And they put out a job offer saying, hey, you may not be in security yet, and that's fine. We have an opening and we will train you. So you don't have to have the 18 years of security experience to be an intern for us, which is a talk I went to right before we got on here.
Had that one. And there was a little bit of a tension there.
Yeah. She was like, she was talking about, we need to really kind of open the doors for the security industry, and the future is down at your local coffee shop. And her point is, we have all these job descriptions that are completely ridiculous across the industry, that they scare people off from even trying, and or eliminate people because the HR teams who are looking at the requirements and then judging resumes that are coming in, right? They're weeding them out. And so, to your point, it's, there's a lot of talent out there, and there's a lot of opportunity, and we need to open the doors.
Yeah. And in fact, there was one of the girls that was on the discussion, the panel or whatever. She had an interesting story where she went to Boston University and got a computer science bachelor's degree and headed down that road and, all that stuff. But then she was like, man, I just do not like, development. I do not like computer programming, which if computer science is your thing, I guess you're going to find out if you like it or not. Right.
Right.
But then she got into like, a different field in cybersecurity and ended up taking a class in like some digital forensics kind of stuff, incident response, through a local community college. And that's where she got connected to this one guy who worked at a company, and then ended up, that's the direction that she ended up going. And so they talked about networking a lot, which is important. Yeah. So it's good to go to your local security thing, or I know they're a lot virtual now, but still go to those things. And, but I found that fascinating that, you invest all this time into this undergraduate degree, a lot of money, a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears. And then it's the local community college thing that kind of launched the path. So fascinating.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it was pre-RSA, but I was listening to a CISO talk, and he's like, yeah, I like to call on burnt out economists to come over to the security side, because it's like they're very well trained to study deep information. And when I'm looking for analysts, I'm not necessarily looking for people who have security skills. I'm looking for people who have great analytic skills, and I can teach them the security stuff.
That's right.
And so, so it's interesting to see how the doors are opening, across the board, for, stopping with all this. I need a CISSP, a CH, and 15 years of Kubernetes experience, which, her point is like, Kubernetes hadn't been out for what, a day and a half. So
right. Right. Yeah. You need 20 years experience in this technology that just got, deployed.
That's right.
Yeah, there's Sarah. Yep.
That's right. And Sarah, yeah, blasphemy. That's right.
Yep.
Exactly. The 15 years of experience on something that's been out. That just means they expect you to work 120 hours a week, right? It's
right.
It's the person years, right? Not the actual years.
That's
so
right.
Just work 120 hours a day for 5 years, and you meet that qualification.
You could put that on your resume. Yeah, you could say I've got 15 dog years experience. Years.
There you go.
You can qualify it however you need to, right?
There you go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This has been great, man.
It has, yeah. So one of the ones that I wanted to share, it was really interesting. I didn't get to see the whole thing, so I'm going to go back and watch it if they make them available later. But the clickbait title was CVSS scores are dead.
Nice.
And it's like, oh, really now? So in the talk, he's like, we have 4 alternatives, but when I went through the slides, I only saw 3. So maybe the slides build, but because I have static copies, they don't build. But the alternatives there, exploit prediction scoring system, the EPSS, the stakeholder specific vulnerability categorization, the SSVC, and then the vulnerability priority rating, the VPR. So, stuff for us to dig into. Maybe on a future show, we'll do a talk on CVSS. I remember internally we had a presentation on, hey, here's how we land on different risk assessments, and that was a pretty fascinating internal talk. And maybe we could get a generalized version of that with CVSS, but also kind of dig into some of these other alternatives that the industry may or may not be moving to. But just a quick nugget that I found it very interesting, but I didn't get to see the whole thing. So, I won't lean one way or the other. And then another one was with API testing. There's a guy, and let me put the link in there real quick. Built out a mind map of API testing. And it's on GitHub. So you guys can go out and grab that. And so as you're deploying your Nginx API gateways, then you can test the efficiency of your deployment skills and the effectiveness of your policies by using a tool such as the mind map for API testing, which awesome. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
And finally, before we get out of here, I just had a couple extra things that I want to dig into a little bit more as we go. The threat modeling is certainly fascinating. I went through a 2-hour lab with Sonal Yu on Tuesday with the cyber defense matrix, and we were taking all these different vendors, and they were the new guys on the block, and so nobody knows a whole lot about them. And based on their 2 to 3 sentence elevator pitch of what they do, we had to put them into the cyber defense matrix. And, are they identity? Are they, protect? Are they response? Down the road. And so it was pretty fascinating because some of it was such marketing word salad. You're like, I'm reading the words, but I have absolutely no idea what they do. And so we had to go to extra blurbs to even understand what they did. And so, if you're out looking for a security, you're looking for security products to fill a hole, how in the world do you find it if your vendors aren't adequately equipping you to understand what it is that they do? So I want to spend more time in threat modeling and kind of understanding the cyber defense matrix and go through more examples. We had a lot of little exercises in that lab that was really good. I want to understand converged IT OT better. And then it may or may not be directly related to security, but I've heard all this talk about non-fungible tokens. And it's this little enigma black box out there where I don't really understand what they are. And I've read a couple things about it, and I still don't understand what they are and why people are paying $1 gazillion for them. And so, maybe it's just we're such an affluent society that people have money to throw away. I don't know. But
what a mess.
But I want to understand non-fungible tokens more. And then extended detection and response, XDR was a buzzword I saw in a lot of talks. And so just that's my little learning list for myself going forward from RSA.
Nice. Well, when you figure out non-fungible tokens, let us all know. It's just crazy. I've read a couple articles on that. One of them started off with like, hey, I'm going to try to explain to you what this is. And please don't think that I've completely lost my mind. And then they go on to explain it. And then they're like, okay, now that you've read all about it, you're probably thinking people have completely lost their mind, which is totally true. It's crazy stuff, man. We could spend some time on that. There was this one festival, I think, I don't even remember which one it was, or this big conference festival-y whatever thing, and they had promised like this really like high dollar meal, catered meal, whatever, and ends up the whole thing was a complete disaster. They didn't get anything, and so it was like this styrofoam, container with like a piece of bread and like an old piece of meat or something in it, and like that's it. Well, then someone turned that into a non-fungible token and sold it for like millions of dollars. So the irony is that come full circle, that actually was a high dollar meal, but
just not for the attendees.
Not for the attendees. That's right. So
yeah. Okay. So I'm guessing Peter is dropping the science on us right here. NFT explainer. What is blockchain crypto art fact? Okay. So we'll have to have Peter back on, and he can walk us through the whole thing.
That's right. That's right.
Peter, that's your homework.
I love it.
And Sarah had a comment on the Economist. She's had success turning financial auditors into security specialists, testing access control and growing from there. Get creative and invest in teaching. Yeah, that's the bottom line. I go back to the Trusted Sec Dave Kennedy tweet I saw about, hey, if we want to build up the industry, we might have to stop expecting the moon of people coming into the industry and get down in the weeds and just pull them up, pull them up to where we are and come side by side and be willing to do the hard work of passing on what we know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is what we aim to do here every week on this show and in the DevCentral community to share what we know. And so if you guys have questions out there that we haven't answered, that you have that haven't been asked, don't be shy. Share those, whether it's a question on DevCentral, shooting us an email, asking on this show, even asking out at Stack Overflow and the likes, because we try to watch the F5 tags out there as well. Don't be shy. It's best to get the questions out there so that you can grow your own skills. And frankly, often the questions we get, we grow our skills in the process too, because we have a lot of products and we have a lot of versions of those products and we support a lot of protocols and a lot of technologies. And I don't know it all. I doubt I'll ever know it all. And so it's a great big family here at F5, but also in the DevCentral community where we take care of each other.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's awesome to just constantly learn and help each other. So that's what we're all about.
Yep. All right. Any RSA parting thoughts from you, John? I think I've said my piece.
Yeah, exactly. No, I appreciate that. It's always good to connect and just kind of keep your thumb on the pulse of what's happening around the world and meet new people to the extent that you can virtually, I guess, but. Just to kind of know, hey, these are topics that are talked about, and so it's been a good time to attend this week.
Yeah, I got a lot out of RSA. Look forward to hopefully we have the opportunity to do it next year. Maybe we could even virtually DEF CON and Black Hat this year. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, exactly. That'd be awesome, man.
Hint, Sarah.
Let's do it. Awesome.
That's right. All right. Well, everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see you back here next Thursday, 12:30 Pacific, for an episode of You Want Answers. And then 2 weeks from today, we're back here with another episode of DevCentral Connects. So
that's right.
Enjoy RSA. If you attended, thank you for joining us on our little journey this week, if you didn't. And we'll see you out there in the community.
All right.